Hey, so we've all heard the names Jaiswal, Oswal, Jain, Shah, Khandelwal, Agrawal. These names appear across the length and breadth of India today in commerce and manufacturing, markets and politics. They're probably some of your names, but few of us are aware of the fascinating history behind them. A tale of social mobility, high-stakes politics, and the evolution of medieval India's best-attested commercial institutions. I'm Anirudh Kanisetti, historian author of Lords of the Deccan. Welcome to Thinking Medieval, where every week we tell you something new about our complex, innovative past. Always feel free to check out our research and citations, and remember that we're all figuring out how to think about our messy, bloody, dazzling history. In December 2022, the National Museum in Delhi organized an exhibition of Jain manuscripts dating to between 1000 to 1500 CE or so. Produced with magnificent calligraphy of gold leaf, richly colored with red and blue pigment, these manuscripts were obviously commissioned by fabulously wealthy individuals. Many of them were medieval Gujarati merchants. In their own time, they were power brokers whom every great figure, whether king or religious teacher, had to deal with. But they're strangely invisible to us today. When we think of India's past wealth and glamour, it's most often a royal court that pops into our minds. But arguably, far more fiscal muscle was controlled by merchants. The invisibility of the medieval West Coast merchant is also tied to the fact that elements of South Asian culture are not as visible in the Western Indian Ocean world compared to the Eastern Indian Ocean world. Certainly, in the East African coastline and Arabian Peninsula, one does not see the spectacular Hindu-Buddhist temples that one does in Southeast Asia, more on that here, but this doesn't mean that Indians were less present in the Western Indian Ocean world. When interacting with that region's equally ancient urban and commercial networks, Indian presence just took different forms. Dozens of Indian merchant traders are named in medieval Egyptian Jewish texts dating to around 1200 CE as shipwrights, captains, and bankers. The appearance of these Gujarati merchants on the historical scene is a sign of the increasing density of exchange in the Western Indian Ocean. In Trade and Traders in Western India, AD 1000 to 1300, historian V.K. Jain provides the most comprehensive overview of these individuals. Iran, Mesopotamia, and Gujarat, which have had flourishing trade ties since at least the Harappan period over 4,000 years ago, have frequently exchanged financial, agrarian, religious, and commercial ideas. By around 1000 CE, developments in irrigation technology in these regions using clockwork and ox-powered mechanisms led to rising agricultural yields. In Gujarat, this prompted local landowners to take to trade. Many of these landowners actually came from nascent Rajput castes. According to Jain, some Oswal, Jaiswal, and Agrawal merchants still claim Kshatriya origin as a result. He cites a 13th century inscription to make this explicit. In Epigraphia Indica, volume 11, page 61, you can see it on your screen here, a man bearing the surname Soni, which is now associated with Baniyas, refers to his grandfather and great-grandfather as Thakurs. Other castes with social and financial capital also took to trade with gusto. Various medieval texts and grants mention Brahmins selling betel, horses, textiles, wine, ghee, and more. These merchants organized themselves into collective assemblies with their own laws and regulations. According to the medieval legal commentator Medhatithi, certain principal tradesmen used to approach the king and offer to pay him the royal tax fixed upon verbally. After the king agreed to it, they joined together and laid down among themselves certain rules. If anyone transgressed those rules, he was punished for acting against the guild laws. The king could not intervene in these laws except in the most extreme situations. We have examples of similar collective mercantile action in South India as well. But South Indian traders of different occupations banded together into enormous trans-regional merchant corporations such as the Ainuriver of 500, studied by historian Meera Abraham in two medieval merchant guilds of South India. The Ainuriver is attested from Telangana to Sri Lanka to China, and we talked about them here. But merchant corporations in Gujarat were much more locally constrained and focused on specific occupations or merchant lineages. While South India's merchant families did not survive the demise of corporate assemblies in the 15th century, which is a fascinating topic which we can't talk about here, Gujarati lineages did because they never had those in the first place, and that's why they had such long and continuous identities. Some merchants made sure that royals could not interfere in their affairs, like the guys we talked about earlier, but there were also others who became integral to the activities of royals. Medieval Gujarati inscriptions and stories are full of tales of merchants who worked as royal ministers and even generals, gradually becoming courtly aristocrats in their own right. Many of these merchants were also Jain and are known to have commissioned large libraries of manuscripts, some samples of which were present in the national museum's aforementioned exhibition. Merchant generals had extremely dramatic careers, but as these opulent items reveal, their rewards were always worth it. For instance, a ghee merchant named Udayana, originally from Jalore in present-day Rajasthan, made a fortune for himself in Karnavati, which is present-day Ahmedabad, where he managed to impress King Kumarapala of the Chaulukya dynasty. Appointed as the governor of southern Gujarat, Udayana was killed while fighting a local chief in Saurashtra. One of his sons was also a minister of Kumarapala, in which capacity he fought off invasions from the Shilahara dynasty of the Konkan, who, as it happens, were bankrolled by local Muslim merchants. We'll explore that more in a later video. Now, a slightly later Chalukya king, Siddharaja, was even more dependent on merchants, possibly, according to Professor Jain, to pay for the military campaigns that were needed to keep trade and tribute flowing. Two of them ruled as regents during the king's minority, and one of them, Shantu, trained him in the arts of rulership. While returning from a raid to Madhya Pradesh, the young Siddharaja's army was waylaid by a large force of Adivasis, Bhils, and he only managed to escape after Shantu sent him reinforcements. Another merchant general by the name of Sajjana, who built the famous temple of the Jain Tirthankara Neminatha at Girnar, was defeated and raided by Chahamana Vigraha Raja IV, who was the uncle of the much more famous Chahamana Prithviraj III or Prithviraj Chauhan. Building a temple was a sign of tremendous wealth and prosperity. For a merchant to do so indicates a career of high risks, rewards and defeats. But in many ways, all these were just the prelude to some of the grandest structures ever built by medieval Indian merchants, the marble temples of Mount Abu, which we'll visit in a future video. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. Follow us everywhere on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Anirudh and at Connected Histories and on Twitter at Kanisetti. We'll see you next week.